Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever one applies best to you. I'm Taylor, your casual crypt keeper, and I've got something for you today. More naughty priests getting themselves into trouble. Oh, they just can't help themselves, can they? Well, more naughty priests means more naughty confessions. So forgive us, Father, and let's get ready to sin with the best of them with the top 5 unsettling confessions made by priests. You will not believe some of the things these priests have confessed to. I honestly don't know what to ask you for the call to action. I have no idea. Let me know down below which of these stories shocked you the most. Or just tell me something nice about your day. Let's get right into it, eh? Number 5, David Love. Love is in the air, isn't it? David Love, in particular, the pastor of the New Hope Baptist Church in Missouri. A figurehead of the community, inspiring, a friend to all, especially one Randy Stone, a former Marine. Stone trusted Love and would confide in him that he was struggling with his marriage to his wife, Teresa, and he felt that something was growing distant between them. Of course, the pastor couldn't really tell the Marine that, well, the reason there was trouble between them was because the pastor was having an affair with his wife. That's an awkward sitch. Not only were they engaged in an extramarital affair, but they were actively conspiring to get rid of him. This plot would come to a tragic conclusion in 2011 when Teresa conveniently found the body of her dead husband Randy shot with his own weapon in his office. They held a funeral and David Love gave an impassioned, heartfelt eulogy for his dear lifelong friend that he had killed so he could conspire to run away with his wife. David Love was just an inspiration to the community. Really good guy. Now, police suspicions were rising as they were suspecting the case was homicide and were closing in on the two of them. So Love and Teresa fled to South Carolina, which only drew more attention to the pair. Police apprehended the Lovebirds, where the two of them both confessed to the crime. Teresa had shared the passcode to the safe that kept the firearm, and their plan was to have Stone killed, collect the insurance money, and start a new life together in South Carolina. Well, they would find a new life together, but not one in Myrtle Beach knocking back Mai Tais, but one inside prison walls. David Love was sentenced to life in prison. Meanwhile, Teresa was sentenced to 8 years, and presumably the two of them aren't making too many friends in there. And if you're looking for more stories of corrupt priests, true crime, and basically anything scary you can think of under the sun and above it, I'm talking aliens, cryptids, ghouls, goblins, you name it, Top 5 Scary has a video on that and then some. So hit subscribe. Please make sure you hit that little bell so you don't miss nothing. But do that at the end of this video if you wouldn't mind, because I got 4 more crazy stories of priest confessions coming up for you. Well, right about now, actually. Number 4, cheater, breaking the seal. Now here is an interesting one because, well, I guess you could say it's unsettling, and it is about a priest confessing, but he isn't the one committing the crime, at least not legally, perhaps morally. You might find this morally apprehensible. When you take the cloth, you have to vow to uphold the confidentiality within confession, kind of like what doctors and therapists do, but times 10. No matter what you hear, you must keep the seal of confession. The priest assigns you a penance. You're told to do some amount of Hail Marys, Our Fathers, and once you're done with all of that, you're good, absolved, all sin, keep going. Now, sometimes the priest does get a little more involved. You know, they'll come up with a plan to help you find absolution, or sometimes he rats you out. This Maryland woman who posted her situation to Reddit found herself embroiled in a very bizarre legal conundrum. She confessed to the priest that she'd been having an affair, and instead of telling her to pray on the rosary, the priest told her the only thing she could do for penance was to confess to her husband. Obviously, she didn't like the idea of that much, so she didn't. And when she didn't, he took matters into his own hands and he told the husband that he was being cheated on, breaking the sacred seal of confession. She came home to find her husband packing his bags and leaving and suspected that something might be up. So she turned to Reddit asking if she could take legal advice against the priest if he'd broken the law or anything. But here's the thing. He didn't break any federal, provincial, municipal laws, but he did break a canonical law, going against the laws of the Catholic Church. You see, a vow of confidentiality can only be broken for cases of extreme personal endangerment, such as criminal cases. You know, if you go to a priest and you confess, I'd really like to kill this person, here's how I'm gonna do it, he's allowed to tell somebody about that. But having a personal attachment to one particular confession is not a good enough reason, which means he could face excommunication and be excised from the church and the cloth as a whole. Excommunication, it's for everybody from heretics to gossips, the worst sin of them all. Number 3, John David Terry. Coming up next is going to be Reverend John David Terry, who got deeply confused as to what a priest's job entails. If you don't know, you're supposed to give sermons and listen to confessions and bless babies. You don't really stage elaborate ruses and scams, but you know, it's okay to get confused. It happens to the best of us. I get confused all the time. The year was 1987, and the Reverend had already stolen $30,000 from the church, stuffing the collection plate into his pockets, I bet. But he knew the fast life couldn't last, and he felt trapped in his priestly ways, and he wanted to start his life over again. He wanted another shot at it. Instead of being born again, David Terry did what any of us would do in a situation like that. He killed another man in an attempt to fake his death to avoid paying the money he owed the church, like any simple, good, honest man of God would do. I can see why this guy was such a respected member of the church. So he lured the church's handyman to the church attic, put one in the back of his head, and then pulled a little hitman, Agent 47, changed his clothes with the handyman's, and then to take it a disgusting step further, cut the man's head off and any identifying body parts with tattoos. You don't think the investigators would notice that immediately? You don't think they'd notice immediately that anything that could ID a body wasn't there? Anyway, that wasn't enough though, because then Terry planted false clues using the victim's fingerprint to try and make it seem like the handyman was the one who killed him. That seems like unbelievably rude. It's one thing to kill a handyman, fake your death, but to frame him for it? He then tried to burn the church down to cover his tracks, but hey, like I alluded to, investigators are actually pretty good at noticing foul play. The body wasn't burnt enough, so they realized immediately that it wasn't who they wanted. The coroner reported they had a different body than the Reverend, and it was less than 48 hours before David Terry confessed to his crimes. He was apprehended, arrested, convicted, and put to death. I don't really have a funny way to end that point. He's dead. Number 2, Joseph Tizo. Hey, World War II, what a crazy time, eh? What a crazy time that was. I wasn't there, I don't know. When we talk of the rise of fascism, part of what makes it so frightening is how much help the guys who ended up running Germany had from everywhere, from all these different sides, including the church. It's very well known that Benito Mussolini and the Vatican had a very close working relationship, and without Mussolini, the Vatican would not be the sovereign state that it is today, so there's a studied history of fascism and the Catholic Church rubbing elbows a little bit. Before that though, Germany was at war with Czechoslovakia in 1938, and a selection of both Allied and Axis countries agreed to the Munich Agreement, which would annex parts of Czechoslovakia and would then create the new Slovak Republic. Well, a new republic would need a new leader, right? And who better than to tend to a flock than a man of God? That's where Joseph Tizo comes in, a Roman Catholic priest who was an ardent supporter of the National Socialist Party in Germany. He was only seated in power during the time of the war, but in the few years he was sitting president, he engaged in more than enough evil to last a lifetime. Anti-Semitism, horrific legislation, and was actively complicit in sending people to the camps without remorse, certainly what a man of the cloth would practice. Now, if you know your history, you know the Soviet army ran down the Slovak Republic by the end of 1945 and pretty much chased Tizo out of the country, where he tried to flee to Germany, thinking he'd be safe there for some reason, but American forces in Germany captured him and extradited him to Czechoslovakia to face man and God for all that he'd done. High treason and collaboration with a certain unfavorable political party were the official charges, and for penance, they skipped right over his rights and went straight to the hanging. He was hung in his clerical uniform, a somber reminder of the vow he broke. He was then buried in secret in an unmarked grave to prevent anyone from paying homage to the late leader. And number 1, this one. Well, that was kind of a dour note to end on, wasn't it? I know you clicked on this knowing it was going to be scary, true crime stuff, but that was still pretty dour. We could probably stand to alleviate the mood just a little bit, so I thought for the number 1 spot, we'd end on an unsettling thing seen by a priest that was also a funny one. It was a demonic presence in the church, a very domineering presence. Travis Clark was a 40-year-old priest of St. Peter and Paul Church in LA, and he received a 3-year prison sentence for, how do I put this gently? filming a film for adults on the church's altar with two women who prefer leather and chains and whips when it comes to love. Leather, lace, if you're following along with that. And if you don't really know what I'm talking about right now, that's okay too, but you're probably too young to be watching this sport. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a little fun. What you do in your bedroom is totally your business. I'm not sure though, if you're a priest, if you should be sinning directly in the place you talk about how sinning is bad and also filming yourself doing the sinning. A nearby resident noticed lights on late inside the church, and when they went to see what the big deal was, were understandably more than a bit surprised by the scene on the altar. You don't really expect to see two women dressed to the nine in gothic corsets, high heels, and a lot of really fun toys around them. Not like Lego or Transformers, but like, you know. The two women were spared jail time, but were both sentenced to 2 years probation. But you want to know what the funniest part of all this was? Maybe just to me. I do have a twisted sense of humor. They burned the altar after this. They ordered it desecrated beyond repair and burned it down. So many unspeakable things in history happen in churches, but holy water was not enough to scrub these stains out. The black light will reveal sins that God doesn't even know about. Wow. And that's about all she wrote for this one, my ghouls and goblins. Probably about time we finish this video too. You take it easy, creep on creeping on now, and I'll see you in the next one, as long as I don't get excommunicated. Take it easy now.